Hello peeps, how are you doing? Choose life, choose Jesus, and we're back. Episode 4 of our series on Samson, and today we have a very interesting title. God's sovereignty doesn't sanitize your sin, it outlasts it. God's sovereignty does not sanitize your sin, it outlasts it. And we are in Judges 14 verse 4, which says, his father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. Samson has wants this girl, has told the parents, I want that girl. And now we're being told in verse 4 that the parents didn't know that the Lord was seeking an opportunity. So what do we ask ourselves? One, does this mean that what Samson did or what he wanted was right? We covered about the Philistines and the way he wanted that woman in the last episode. But now we are seeing that God actually says in his word that it was him he was seeking. They didn't know that it was God seeking an opportunity with the Philistines. So how does this wrap into Samson's sin, Samson's desire, and him acting really out of the flesh? And I had this from somewhere, a very nice channel I'd recommend. It's called Smart Christian's channel. And he usually likes saying, and I'm gonna adapt that in this channel, you're not spiritual if you're not biblical. And moving forward, we'll be reminding everyone that you're not spiritual if you're not biblical. Now, what is sovereignty? Sounds like a very big word, but simply, it's the ultimate power or authority a state or governing body has to rule itself, its people, and its territory without interference. This means complete independence, supreme right to do what the sovereign leader wants without any interference, without any questioning. That's what sovereignty is. And we need to understand that God is sovereign. He's actually the only sovereign. There are countries who have sovereign leaders, but they can't control what other countries can do. They can't control what the continent can do or what the territory can do. They can't even control when they're gonna die. But we're gonna see that God is sovereign. And we need to understand what sovereignty is and the sovereignty of God, so that we really understand what this verse is telling us. So today we're just gonna study this verse. We want to dig into it as much as possible, and of course everything that we're learning helps us understand the story of Samson. Almost everyone, believers and unbelievers, know that they have free will. Free will is just doing what you want, what you please, but people rarely think about God's will. God has a free will, guys. God is free to will what he wants to will. And your free will cannot compare to the will of God. Because you can will and want many things. I can want to be the president of Kenya. Or I can want to be the king of England. But that doesn't mean that it will happen. God has a free will. He wills what he wants and he achieves it. Alright? So, 1, God is sovereign over all things. Over all things. Let's look at Psalm 115 verse 3. Our God is in the heavens. He does all that he pleases. All that he wants, all that he pleases, he does. Daniel 4 verse 35. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done? So God does what he wants in heaven, on earth, and no one can stop him or ask him, what have you done? None. Job 42 verse 2. I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Nothing that God wills or wants can be stopped. There are many other verses, but we're just gonna mention those three. 2, God is sovereign over all authority, over nations, over kings, over presidents. He is sovereign over all those things. Romans 13 verse 1, let every person be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. So even the authorities that exist have been instituted by God. We might not approve of them. They might be evil. Of course, they're evil, but God is sovereign over them. Listen to this, Proverbs 21 verse 1. The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. You see, God is in control of men's hearts, and he can turn the king to do what he wants. 3, God is sovereign over life and death. 1 Samuel 2:6. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. So the Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord is sovereign over life and death. Do you know you cannot die if God doesn't want you to die or doesn't allow it? Deuteronomy 32 verse 39. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God beside me. I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal, and there is none that can deliver out of my hand. This is God speaking, saying, I kill and I make alive. No one can deliver you from me. This is what salvation is about. God is going to execute his judgment on every sinner because he's holy and nothing can stop him. And he's gonna judge you. He's gonna judge me. And we're all guilty. And we're all going straight to hell. The only difference with the believer is that when God judges us, Jesus will have taken that place. And that's why we will be delivered. But the judgment will still happen, has happened. Jesus had to take that judgment. That's a very good side note. Let's continue. 4, God is sovereign over evil and suffering. Evil and suffering. He's sovereign over it. It just doesn't happen. God is sovereign. We can't have a sovereign God if he's not sovereign over evil, over diseases, over calamities. Isaiah 45 verse 7. I form light and create darkness. I make well-being and create calamity. I am the Lord who does all these things. There's no doubt about it. God is taking the credit. And this is the God we believe. Let's not make up a God in our heads, a God that doesn't cause calamities, because there's no such God. And I wouldn't want a God who wouldn't be in charge of calamities. Like if a tsunami and a hurricane comes, or a weird outbreak or disease, and God is not above that. Lamentations 3:37-38. Who has spoken it, and it came to pass, unless the Lord has commanded it? Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that good and bad come? It is from God. That doesn't mean he's evil. That doesn't mean he sins. But he uses all things, like we'll see. But it comes from him. That's what that verse is telling us. There's no two ways about it. Amos 3:6. Is a trumpet blown in a city, and the people are not afraid? Does disaster come to a city unless the Lord has done it? Unless the Lord has done it. Again, he takes the credit. God is sovereign over human plans, over all our Vision 2030s and all our plans to do this tomorrow, all our plans to whatever, rule the world, live forever, all those plans. The plan that we had in the Tower of Babel, Listen to this. Proverbs 19:21. Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. There are many plans that won't come to pass. And even the ones that come to pass, they will achieve the purpose of the Lord. The purpose of the Lord will always stand. Proverbs 16:9. The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. Man can plan all he wants, but it is the Lord that establishes the steps. And 6 is a tricky one, but we'll do a future study on this. God is sovereign over salvation. All that the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me, I will never cast out. So what does that mean? It means the Father gives people to Jesus, gives souls to Jesus. It is the Father who does it. So you're not going to repent if the Holy Spirit has not convicted you, or if God has not given you to Jesus. Does that mean that when you call out to God, you won't be saved? No. It does not mean that. But it means God is sovereign over salvation. Let's look at a few more verses. John 6:44. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day. See what you're talking about, conviction? No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. It is God who draws you to believe in his Son Jesus, and I will raise him up on the last day. That's on the same, those two verses are on the same chapter. He doubles down, just in case we don't want to believe it. Romans 9:15-16. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. Let me just repeat that verse. Romans 9:15-16. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. You're not going to receive mercy if God doesn't want to give you mercy. God is sovereign over all these things, and he wouldn't be God if he's not sovereign. And we need to stop this entitlement. I remember one time I was so entitled, I was in sin. And I'm like, God, why aren't you saving me? Why aren't you doing this? But you're not entitled. But we have to also remember the character of God, and none that calls out to him. If you call out to God, he will surely answer you and come to your rescue. God is sovereign. Now that we understand what sovereignty is, we've seen examples that God is sovereign over all these things. God is sovereign over all things. God is sovereign over human plans. God is sovereign over all authority. God is sovereign over life and death. God is sovereign over salvation. So we understand what sovereignty is. And from sovereignty now, we get something called providence. Now, providence is God's sovereign governance on human choices, including sinful ones, without becoming the author of those choices. So providence means that God sovereignly uses our actions, our decisions, whether they're evil or not, whether they're sinful or not, God still uses them for his purpose. All right? And this is what we see in the story of Samson. So that's why we're covering this, just to get that understanding. Let's look at a few verses. Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called to his purpose. So this, I've never really looked at this verse well, but when I looked at it, it's easy to say, oh, it's only for those that love God, which is true. But for good, all things, he uses all things for the good of those who love him. So if those all things are everything, good, bad, from bad people, from good people, he uses all those things for those who love God. We're going to look at a few examples later, 2 examples just now. Ephesians 1:11, in him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. It's a beautiful verse. He works all things according to the counsel of his will. God does not take counsel from anyone apart from himself. And he uses all things according to his will, the counsel of his will. And right there we have having predestined, meaning he chose it before. It was destined for that. So God is sovereign over everything. God uses all things. Sins, evils, calamities, name it. He uses it for his purposes. Let's look at an example. We all know the story of Joseph, an innocent young man. We know the story how the father loved him. We know how that whole family setup happened, and the father loved the mother more, and he kind of showed favoritism to Joseph, which is not okay. And Joseph was just innocent and had this dream that God would raise him up. You know, those two dreams that he had. I'm not gonna get into them, but eventually the brothers was so jealous that one day when he was bringing them food, they took him and they threw him in a well, and they actually wanted to kill him. Eventually they sold him as a slave and lied to the father that he was eaten by a wild animal. So messed up what the brothers did, your own flesh and blood. And listen to this, Genesis 45, 4-8. So this is when the brothers, the drought now happens, and then the brothers now are sent to Egypt by the father to go get food. And Joseph does this thing, he tests them, he brings them, and so this is when he's revealing himself to them. And he says, so Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. And they came near. And he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. This is such wisdom from Joseph, and he's telling us, it's not you who sent me here. It was God. So God used the jealousy, the callousness, the wickedness of the brothers to achieve his purpose with Joseph. If you think about the life of Joseph, how he was accused by Potiphar, he went to prison, you know, he told those 2 guys the dreams. Eventually that guy communicated to the king. That's how he got out of there. He eventually became the ruler of Egypt, second in command. Basically, he ruled Egypt. Like that king was just there to be there, but it's Joseph who dealt with all affairs. And Joseph says this was all God. God used all those circumstances. God used the lust of Potiphar's wife, sorry. God used, in this verse we're being told, God used that occasion. You sold me into Egypt, but God used that too. He sent me here so that I could save life. He acknowledges that this is God. Genesis 50:20. Again, as for you, you meant evil against me. You see, this is what we're talking about. It doesn't remove responsibility from the person. You meant evil against me. So you're guilty. They are guilty of being jealous and wicked towards their brother. But God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. That's also Joseph speaking. Genesis 50:20. Let's look at another example, Jesus. God planned salvation. We don't even know when. It was always planned. When Adam sinned in the Garden of Eden, God said, the seed of the woman shall strike your head. Talking to the serpent, aka Shetani, the devil. And all throughout, we see the plan of salvation. And the devil couldn't even figure it out. That must have been the worst time for the devil and his kingdom, because they orchestrated the death of Jesus and they thought that would actually solve the problem. Just look at this verse, Acts 2:22-23. Men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested to you by God with mighty works and wonders and signs that God did through him in your midst, as you yourselves know. This Jesus delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God. You crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. That's a very beautiful verse, because it says, delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God. Everything went to plan. Every single detail went to plan. So no one was messing up with God's plan by trying to stop it, by trying to do this, by trying to kill Jesus. In fact, there's a time when they tried to kill Jesus, and Jesus just told them, it's not time. So it's not going to happen. But that doesn't take the responsibility of the involvement of everyone. The religious leaders, Israel as a whole, Pilate, doesn't take away that. It says, you crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. Doesn't take away the responsibility. But this is God providentially, sovereignly, providentially working through the actions of men. So now we understand what providence is. This is what we call providence. We understand what sovereignty is, and it is the sovereignty that enables providence to be possible. Because providence can't happen if you're not sovereign. But God will use our actions, our everything for his own purposes. Now we understand what sovereignty is and what providence is. Now we are gonna add something onto it, and that's providential judgment, which is what is happening in the book of Judges, where Samson is. So providential judgment is basically God using the free, sinful, every choice of man, and even spiritual agents, even spirits, like we will see, as an instrument on his verdict on nations, kings, and peoples. Let's just look at Habakkuk 1:5-6. Look among the nations and see, wonder and be astounded, for I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nations, who march through the breadth of the earth to seize dwellings not their own. So it's a very interesting story there in Habakkuk. And God is telling Habakkuk, because Habakkuk is crying out to God, oh, you're not listening to me. This wicked nation is overcoming Israel, God's people. And God is saying, yeah, I raised them up for this. And I'm using them to judge you, the Israelites. And I will also judge them. It is God doing it. In that verse it says, for I am doing, a work in your days. I am doing. It is God doing it, and it is his work. I'm raising the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation. You see, God doesn't cause the bitterness, the hastiness, and as you'll see if you go to that chapter, there's so many characteristics of the Chaldeans that we are told. God doesn't cause that, but he uses it. You see? Let's look at Judges 13:1, which is, we studied the story of Samson. How does it start? Judges 13:1, and the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. God used the Philistines to judge Israel. We are actually in a period of judgment for Israel. That's why the Philistines have won over them. And that's where Samson is coming in. The Philistines did not know that they are being used by God to bring judgment in Israel. They didn't know. So God used their choices, their military strategies, their greed, their whatever to conquer territories to judge Israel. Our verse for today is Judges 14:4. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an occasion against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. So in a period where Philistines are ruling over Israel, so it's a period of judgment for the Israelites. And we are here, Samson all of a sudden wants this woman. He's like saying the parents are against it, but he's like, no, I want that woman. So the parents did not know that this is God seeking an occasion with the Philistines. Neither did the Philistines, neither did Samson. There's a very interesting story in the Bible. Very precious Bible. It's in 1 Kings 22, and it's about a lying spirit. Let me just give some context. We're not going to be able to read the whole verse. But we're in a period where Israel is divided, and we have now the territory called Israel, and we have the territory called Judah. So we have the king of Israel and we have the king of Judah. Now the king of Israel, who is Ahab, we all know Ahab, the wickedest king, now wants to go to war to a place called Ramoth Gilead. And he calls over the king of Judah, who is Jehoshaphat, to go to war with him. And Jehoshaphat is like, yeah, let's go. Now, before they go, it was the custom of kings, at least the wise ones, to seek for spiritual direction or spiritual go-ahead. So they are together, Ahab and Jehoshaphat. They are together in their throne room, and they call over the prophets there in Israel. And 400 prophets come. And the king asks them, I want to go to Ramoth Gilead. Will it be delivered into my hands or not? You see, these people understood spiritual realities that maybe we don't now. And the 400 prophets say, yes, Ramoth Gilead will be given into your hands. And then Jehoshaphat says, don't you have any other prophet? And then Ahab says, there's a prophet called Micaiah, but he always prophesies bad about me. And then Jehoshaphat says, call that prophet. And now this is the prophet speaking. The prophet comes now. So now, 1 Kings 22, 19 to 22. And Micaiah said, therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said one thing, and another said another. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And the Lord said to him, by what means? And he said, I will go out, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, you are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. So this is Micaiah now speaking to the kings and telling him, this is the vision I had. And God is seated on his throne. And I want you to notice that God is actively pursuing the judgment of a wicked king. God is not waiting for the king to fall. God is not waiting for the king to self-destruct. He's actively pursuing that king for judgment, providential judgment. But God, in his infinite wisdom, wants Ahab to make that choice. You know, not really make that choice. What's the words that we can use? Yeah, let's say make that choice, because it will be the will of Ahab, but still it is the will of God that he should be judged. God uses a lying spirit. That's a lying spirit. Can't be a good spirit. There's no good spirits that lie. So we kind of understand something about the spiritual kingdom as well. God does interact with evil spirits, like we see here. And he uses them for his purposes. Numbers 23:19. God is not man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. He has said and he will do it, or he has spoken and will he not fulfill it? Deuteronomy 30 verse 19. Before that, the verse that we just read, that's to tell us that God is not a liar, and he wouldn't lie. He didn't lie to King Ahab. In fact, we'll see he told him the truth, but he uses a lying spirit. So the lying spirit is guilty of lying, but God uses that spirit providentially. The prophet tells Ahab exactly what he saw and saying exactly what God is saying. All these prophets are lying to you, you're gonna die. But he does not listen. He knows the truth and he chooses to go anyway. He chooses to go to his death. This channel is called Choose Life, Choose Jesus, based on Deuteronomy 30:19. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore, choose life, that you and your offspring may live. You see, God has set before us life and death. John 3:16, believe in my Son, and you will not die. Reject him, and you will die, and you will go to hell. That's why we always say choose life and choose Jesus, because you have been given a choice. And Ahab was told that if you go here, you will die. Just like we're told, if you don't believe in Jesus, who's the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through him. Except through Jesus. No other prophet, no other religion, not even religion, nothing else can get you to the Father except through Jesus. And if you're watching me and you haven't accepted Jesus, you actually are choosing to go to hell. It's God judging you because he's holy and you've sinned. But you have a choice. Like Ahab had a choice. May God help us. So it's a common thing, this thing called providential judgment. And this is the theme as we enter into Judges. The very first verse, as we enter the story of Samson in Judges 13:1, we are seeing the providential judgment of God using the Philistines to judge the Israelites. When we go into this, our verse today, Judges 14 verse 4, we are seeing that God is using that to bring up an occasion against the Philistines. And it's going to cost the Philistines. See? 2 Thessalonians 2, 11-12. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion, so that they may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. That says that God sends that strong delusion, so that those people who have chosen to believe what is false, those people who have chosen to find their pleasure in unrighteousness, I was one of them, God sends them that strong, and they believe. They become so convicted. Atheists, all other religions, every other thing, a strong delusion is sent out by God, sovereignty, providentially. Romans 1:24. Therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. That verse is specifically talking about homosexuality and all other sins mentioned there. And he says, especially for that sin, he gave them over. So God did not cause that sin. That sin originated with them, but God gives them over. That's a judgment. Because how are you going to be saved if you're given over? Romans 1:26. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions, for the women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. See what we're talking about? God gave them over to dishonorable passions. It's dishonorable, but God gives you over to that which you're seeking. Romans 1:28. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. You see, some of these sins, even animals don't do it. So God gives them over to a debased mind. We are now changing men into women and women into men. There's so many things that are happening in terms of sin. Romans 1 is a good place to understand that God gives them over. But that does not mean that God caused it. He didn't. He says it 3 times in that chapter. But to what? They chose to believe and practice what was wrong. Now, what does God not do? So God uses sin, evil spirits, lying spirits, wars, lust, addiction, disease, nature. Look at the plagues of Egypt. Everything for his purposes. However, let's be clear. God does not tempt to sin. James 1:13-14. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. God is holy, God is righteous, has nothing to do with evil. Deuteronomy 32:4. The rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are just. A God of faithfulness and without iniquity, just and upright is he. That's the character of God. Matthew 4:1-3. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, if you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread. So the tempter is the devil. Mark 7:20-23. And he said, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. That's Jesus speaking. From within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these evils come from within and they defile a person. So we are seeing the origin of what defiles us comes from the heart. And the ultimate origin of sin. Romans 5:12. Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned. Sin came through one man, and death came through sin. And death spread to all men. Why? Because all men sinned, including you and me. Now, what's the application? Now that we've learned these things, when we come to Judges 14:4, we now understand that God was using this moment of the girl that Samson saw in Timnah to judge the Philistines. He used Samson's lust, Samson's pursuit of this woman, his shortcomings to achieve his purpose. This will happen over and over again as we study the life of Samson. Does this mean that we have a license to sin now because we know that God will use that for his purposes? The answer is no. Romans 6:15-16. What then? Are we to sin because we are not under law but under grace? By no means. Do you not know that if you present yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you will be slaves of the one whom you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or obedience, which leads to righteousness? Sin will always lead to death, and obedience will always lead to righteousness. Whether that sin is used by God does not excuse you of the responsibility of that sin. So you need to accept Jesus, guys, because he washes us clean of all our sins and changes us. You know, Samson was acting out of his flesh, but God was sovereignly using that to judge the Philistines. God didn't sin. God didn't cause that sin. But his purposes are surely going to be fulfilled, like we've learned. Just because something turned out well and was a blessing does not mean that it was right in the first place and it was of God. So just because this was an occasion of God does not mean that what Samson did was right. That's why we must actively seek God to know and to walk according to his will, and ask that for him to help us to obey his word, for us to do that actively. Samson kept making the wrong moves, but God never lost anywhere. There is not a comfort for compromise. It is a testimony to the kind of God that can take a fallen, broken, blinded, sinful, lustful, chained Nazarite to accomplish his purposes. I had this and it was so scary. But let's say you see your own mother, or wife, or husband in hell when you're in heaven. And how can you be happy when you see someone that you care about in hell? And I had this from R.C. Sproul, and he said, you see, you don't understand the holiness of God and the love for Jesus now, but you will be so holy. You will understand the glory of God, that you will rejoice that that person is in hell, because that is the righteousness of God. It's very scary. So as we go forward, choose life, choose Jesus. Remember that we follow the Bible. You're not spiritual if you're not biblical. So choose life, choose Jesus, and see you in the next one.